Good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are. I'm Paul Clark and welcome to my studio. So, what have I got for you lovely lot today? Well, I thought it was about time that we had another little go at a line and wash. But this is definitely a painting that you can do in the more conventional way if you don't want to do the line work. And we're going to be having a go at painting this lovely little country cottage. So, come and join me and we'll paint this step by step together. So here's the reference photo, which I got from Google Street View, although I have changed the angle around and looked at it from a slightly different view. And a little bit more about this very interesting little place later. And you'll have to forgive my voice this week. I've had a cold and my voice is still a little bit hoarse. Now, for today's paper, I'm using something a little bit different today. This is the Langton watercolour board, and it's about 2mm thick, so definitely won't need stretching. But as you know, any decent watercolour paper will do. And today's colours are cadmium yellow, cobalt blue, magenta, burnt umber, burnt sienna and some Payne's grey. And there's 3 brushes from my range, a 3/4 inch flat, number 12 and number 6 round. So when it comes to line and wash, there are several tools that I like to use for the line work, including this Staedtler waterproof fine liner. But even a good old black ballpoint pen is great for shading. Now this is a dip pen which usually comes available with a whole selection of replacement nibs, dipped into India ink and great for loose line work. I also love to use a stick. It's just picked up from the garden and sharpened to a point. Fabulous for scratchy, arty line work. But the important thing is that the ink must be waterproof. Now I do have a beginner's guide to line and wash, link above if you're interested. Okay, so here is the pencil drawing, and if you want the traceable, you can download it for free from my website, link in the description below. And as mentioned earlier, I'm going to be using the Staedtler Lumacolor Permanent Black Marker, and this is a fine point. Now, with all my line and washes, I don't like to be too neat with the line work. Lots of loose, scratchy lines to add character. We're not looking for a technical drawing. So this whole inking stage took just over 15 minutes, so I've speeded up the process just to make it a little bit less boring. And it'll give me an opportunity to tell you a little bit about this amazing cottage. Well, it's down near Bristol in the West Country, and it forms part of the Blaze Hamlet. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a small group of 9 cottages which surround a small green in Henbury. Now, all the little cottages and the sundial are Grade 1 listed buildings, each one totally unique, and consist of Dial Cottage, which is the one we're painting today, Circular Cottage, Diamond Cottage, Double Cottage, Dutch Cottage, Oak Cottage, Rose Cottage, Sweetbriar Cottage and Vine Cottage. They were built around 1811 in the quintessential English picturesque style and are owned by the National Trust. Now they're all still occupied today but not open to the public, although Rose Cottage is let out as a holiday home. I need to go there. I could definitely spend all week painting every cottage. Clearly see why this cottage is known as Dial Cottage, as it's the closest one to this most beautiful sundial. And it looks like it's got a sort of water pump feature here at the base. Now, once I know that the ink has totally dried, I don't want any smudging, I'm just taking out the pencil work with a rubber eraser. Off we go, and I'm starting by completely wetting the sky area with clean water, and a flat brush is perfect for this, for going around straight edges. And then still with my flat brush, dropping in a nice watery cobalt blue, leaving plenty of gaps for clouds. So I've just decided I'm going for a vignette style painting today, so I'm not painting straight up to the edges. I'm just letting it blend out to white paper. And here, for a very subtle shadow under the clouds, a little touch of watery Payne's grey. Now I'm making up a lot of this as I go along, and I've just decided I'm going to put some nice pink cherry blossom in the tree here, and I'm using some magenta, but you could use quinacridone rose or any bright pink. Just simple blobby shapes. And I'm switching here to my number 6 brush just for some finer detail. And why not add a little bit of colour down here as well. And for these distant trees, I'm using my normal green mix of cadmium yellow and cobalt blue, but you can see this is very heavily blue biased with only a little touch of yellow in there. Painting trees with a blue bias will always help to send them into the distance. Now for the rest of the trees and bushes, and you can see that this one is very heavily on the yellow side. Then dropping in here a darker value green for some shadows, all going in wet in wet. Now for the tree behind, and I'm just filling in the gaps with the green, and it doesn't matter if you leave some little white areas, it all adds to the effect. And just so I can be a little bit neater, I've switched to my number 6 brush. And just touching in a few darker area greens here just underneath the blossoms. And I have to say, I'm really liking this watercolour board. You can really put in a lot of moisture without even a hint of any buckling. A nice watery yellowy green here for all the lawn in front. And I'm adding in clean water here to make sure all the edges are nice and soft, so a natural transition into the white. And while that's still wet, I'm dropping in a nice dark value shadow from a tree which we can't see. So we'll stick with a sort of spring vibe sort of thing, so I'm just adding in a few leaves here, just beginning to bud. just a little touch of burnt umber here for the branches. And continuing on here for the roofs with the burnt umber, and I'm using my number 12 brush, trying to paint as few brush strokes as possible. And this is one of the things I love with painting in line and wash. You've done all the hard work with the line and with the drawing, and now you can just relax, and basically it's just a colouring in exercise. And a good way to gauge that you're not painting too thickly and you're still getting the transparency in the paint is that you can see the line work through the wash. Next, for these lovely ornamental chimneys, and they definitely have a terracotta orangey feel, so burnt sienna is the perfect colour. And while still wet, I'm painting in the shadow side with a touch of burnt umber. Now for the stone walls, and they do have a very much a greyish feel to them, so I'm using mostly Payne's Grey with a touch of burnt umber. And this little corner of the house is quite deep into shadow, so I'm painting with quite a dark mix of Payne's Grey. So for the sundial here, and it's slightly warmer than the colour of the house, so I'm using a 50-50 mix of Payne's Grey and burnt umber. So now we need to let this totally dry. So it's a perfect time for a short break. And because we're down in the West Country, how about a glass of Somerset cider brandy? So when that's dried, I'm coming back in with a slightly thicker consistency of the same colour for all the shadows. And to stop me from fiddling too much, I'm using my nice big number 12 brush. And now with a much thicker consistency mix and my number 6 brush, I'm putting in all these deep dark shadows on the cottage itself. Less is more with things like these roof tiles. You don't need to put in every one, your eye will just fill it in. It's a sunny day, so nice and dark in these shadow areas. There's a nice diagonal shadow from the tree that we can't see sweeping across the front of the cottage here and the roof. So I'm using a darker Payne's grey for the shadows across the walls, and then a darker brown mix for the shadows as they fall across the roof. And back to Payne's grey for the shadows across the window. It just looks more natural changing the shadow colours like this rather than just putting one grey shadow across all the surfaces. And it looks like the little face of the sundial here is in blue. And of course we need a little bit of splatting here, so I'm just tapping in a dark green just to create some foliage texture. And just a little bit of flecking in the grass here. Next is mixed media time, and I'm taking this yellow pastel pencil and just bringing in a few lighter coloured leaves in front of some of these dark areas. Now, I could have masked these areas out at the very beginning, but you've got to admit this is a much easier way of doing it. Next, I'm taking a creamy colour pastel pencil just to suggest that there's something here just being caught by the light, and it just helps to break up this big dark area. And then with a white Posca ink pen, I'm just putting in a few little highlights up here in the blossom. And another few little white highlights here and there. And I can't resist a few little daisies. Now, this is a Posca pen with a much finer nib. I think it's a 0.7 on the side here, and I'm just putting in these little features here in the window, the little leaded light bits. And finally, I'm taking a slightly damp tissue and just softening some of these edges, as I really want to get that vignette feel going. And then finally, with my black pen, I'm just bringing out a few little areas which have got lost with the colour. There we go, all done, and this one, including all the drawing work, about 3.5 hours. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and you'll give it a go, whether you paint it as a conventional watercolour or you do the line and wash. Just enjoy the experience and have fun. And just as a little reminder, if you're interested in any of our workshops, events or holidays, details are in the description below. But in the meantime, please don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment. I do read every single one, can't always reply to them all. And of course, I look forward to seeing you all again next week for another Watercolour Wednesday. Cheers now, everyone.